The wind carried the scent of smoke and earth, whispering tales of bloodshed, of settlers carving homes in a land that had never been theirs to claim, of warriors who had fought too long and lost too much. Taza sat before the fire, its flickering light casting jagged shadows over his face. The embers crackled softly, like whispers of ancestors long gone. He listened to the voices around him, men of his tribe, warriors hardened by betrayal and war, their bodies marked by scars that told stories of battles fought in the name of survival. Tonight, there was no laughter among them, no shared tales of hunts or victories. Tonight, there was only the weight of an order that would change the course of his life. Nantan, the chief, sat across from him, his eyes heavy with expectation. "The settlers have taken too much," he said, voice low, deliberate. "They cut into the land, push us into the hills like starving dogs. They build their homes where our ancestors walk." He reached into the folds of his robe and tossed something onto the dirt between them. It was a shard of pottery, cracked and dull, remnants of a people who had lived here long before the white man set foot upon this land. "They do not see what they destroy." Taza said nothing. He didn't need to. He knew the purpose of this meeting. The settlers had killed warriors in fear, slaughtered women and children in greed. There was no room for mercy anymore. "The cabin by the river," Nantan continued. "A woman and her young ones live there. They must be removed." Removed. The words settled like stone in his chest. "You will do this," the chief said, watching him closely. "You will prove you have not grown soft like the others." Taz's jaw tightened. He had never been soft. He had been raised in war, shaped by the knife and the bow, by the lessons of loss. He stood without a word, securing his weapons, the leather grip of his knife familiar beneath his fingers. The others watched him in silence, knowing what was to come. This was duty. This was justice. As he stepped into the night, the fire behind him dimmed, swallowed by darkness. The moon was high by the time he reached the homestead. It stood alone, a stubborn mark against the land, its wooden walls weathered but strong. The scent of livestock lingered in the air, mingling with the distant burn of pine from the chimney's mouth. Taza moved like a shadow, his moccasins silent against the dirt. His breath was slow, measured. He had done this before. A quick entry, a blade to the throat, and silence would reclaim what had been stolen. But as he approached, something stilled his hand. A sound, soft, fragile. Laughter. It was not the laughter of men, nor the arrogant mirth of soldiers drinking their spoils. It was lighter, filled with innocence. A child's laugh. He crept closer, his gaze finding the window. Through the slats of the wooden shutters, he saw them. A woman, her hair loose over her shoulders, sat by the fire. Her face was lined with something deeper than age, grief, perhaps, or exhaustion that came from fighting battles of her own. Beside her, two children curled beneath a quilt, their bodies small beneath the weight of the world. The younger of the two, no more than 6 or 7, reached for the woman's hand, whispering something. The woman nodded, brushing a strand of hair from the child's forehead. Taza's grip on the knife faltered. He had expected a soldier, a rifle-wielding man, someone ready to take from his people as so many had before. Not this. Not them. The past clawed at him, unbidden. He saw his mother, the night the Mexican soldiers came, their faces hard with cruelty. He had been a boy, hiding beneath the floorboards as she fought to protect him, her screams swallowed by the thunder of gunfire. His sister had been younger than the girl inside, her hands just as small. He had buried them both beneath the red earth, marking their graves with stones that time had long since carried away. A breath escaped him, rough and uneven. He could not do this, but the order stood. If he left them, another would come in his place, someone without hesitation, without ghosts that whispered warnings in the dead of night. A floorboard creaked. The woman stiffened, reaching for the rifle beside her chair. The firelight caught the steel, reflecting a cold promise. Taza stepped back, retreating into the shadows. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and the distant howl of coyotes. He did not run, but he did not linger. Before he turned away completely, he whispered the only warning he could offer. Asterisk, leave this place. Others will come. Asterisk. Then he was gone. Sarah Calloway gripped the rifle, heart hammering in her chest. She had not imagined it. There had been someone outside. She moved quickly, stepping over the sleeping forms of her daughters and unlatching the door. The night was still, save for the rustling of trees in the wind. Nothing. And yet, the feeling remained, a presence just beyond the reach of sight. Her hands trembled as she shut the door, bolting it firmly. She returned to the fire, staring into its depths, but its warmth did little to chase away the chill settling in her bones. She had come to this land with her husband, believing in the promise of a new start. That promise had died with him, leaving her to carve a life from the wild with nothing but sheer will. And now, it seemed, that life was at risk again. She glanced at her daughters, their faces peaceful in sleep. Tomorrow they would pack. They would leave before dawn. She did not know what had spared them tonight, but she knew better than to question fate. She also knew that mercy was a fleeting thing on the frontier. Taza did not return to camp. He could not. His absence would not go unnoticed, and the chief would demand answers. There would be none he could give. Instead, he followed the river, moving through the dark with the quiet certainty of a man who had made his choice and sealed his fate. By morning, he would be hunted. By sundown, he would be marked a traitor. And yet, for the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. He had walked into the night with blood on his hands. He would walk into the morning with something else. The first sign of danger came with the smell of smoke. Sarah Calloway jolted awake, her heart hammering against her ribs before her mind even caught up to the threat. The air inside the cabin was thick, heavy with the unmistakable scent of burning wood. Then she heard it, the unmistakable snap of a branch outside, the low murmur of voices just beyond the door. She threw off the blanket, her bare feet hitting the floorboards with barely a sound. Lillian stirred beside her, blinking groggily. Margaret lay curled on her side, oblivious. Sarah reached for the rifle. Another sound, a sharp crack like the splitting of timber, sent a chill up her spine. A moment later, the orange glow seeped through the cracks in the shutters. Fire. A new scent, grease, something unnatural. They were burning them out. She barely had time to move before the first shout rang through the night. The voices were not in English, but she understood them all the same. Panic threatened to choke her, but fear would not save them. Action would. She grabbed Lillian's arm, shaking her awake. Take your sister. Out the back now. Lillian's eyes widened, but she did not question. She reached for Margaret, pulling the smaller girl into her arms. The rifle was firm in Sarah's hands as she unlatched the back door, praying the darkness would cover their escape. The moment the door swung open, she saw him. Taza. For a split second, everything stopped. The same man she had seen in the shadows the night before, the one who had spared them. Now, standing at the edge of the tree-line, his face set in stone. Behind her, the flames roared higher. A warrior burst through the front door, his knife gleaming in the firelight. Sarah turned and fired. The gunshot shattered the night. The warrior staggered, but did not fall. He lunged. Then suddenly, an arm wrapped around his throat from behind, yanking him back. The knife never found its mark. Taza drove his blade deep, twisting, ending it in one swift motion. Sarah barely had time to process it before he turned to her, eyes fierce. Run. She didn't argue. She grabbed her daughters and ran into the trees. The night swallowed them whole. They ran until Sarah's lungs burned, until Margaret sobbed from exhaustion. The fire behind them had spread, licking hungrily at the cabin, sending thick plumes of smoke into the sky. Taza was ahead of them, his body moving with the certainty of a man who knew the land like his own heartbeat. He did not look back, but he slowed just enough to make sure they kept up. Sarah's legs trembled beneath her, but she pushed forward. Finally, when they reached a rocky ravine, Taza stopped. He turned to them, his breath steady despite the sprint. Sarah clutched Margaret against her chest. "Oh," she swallowed, still gasping. "Who were they?" Taza's expression did not change. "My people." Lillian let out a sharp breath, eyes darting between them. "Then why? Why did you help us?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I could not let them kill you." Sarah's fingers tightened around the rifle. His voice was calm, unreadable. "They will not stop. You must keep moving." Margaret whimpered, curling into Sarah's side. Lillian looked up at him, her small hands clenched. "Where do we go?" Taza turned, eyes scanning the dark forest. "West. The mountains will hide us." Sarah's head spun. She wanted to distrust him, to question him, to hate him. But the truth was undeniable. If not for him, she and her daughters would be dead. She swallowed. "You could have killed me last night." "I could have." He met her gaze. "But I did not." She exhaled, shaky but resolved. "Then lead the way." The wilderness was merciless. Sarah had traveled before, had braved the untamed land with her husband, had fought to carve out a life. But this was survival, not homesteading. Taza led them along the river's edge, where the current masked their tracks. Margaret clung to Lillian, her small feet stumbling over roots. Sarah lifted her when she could, ignoring the burning in her arms. The sky was a blanket of black velvet, the stars indifferent to their struggle. They walked until dawn, until Sarah's legs trembled with exhaustion. Taza finally stopped beneath a rocky overhang. "We rest here." Sarah collapsed against the stone, pulling her daughters close. Taza stood at the edge of the clearing, watching. She wanted to sleep. God, she wanted to sleep, but the questions gnawed at her. She looked at him. "They'll come after you too, won't they?" His gaze remained on the horizon. "Yes." She studied his profile. Strong, silent, unreadable. A man who had turned against his own to save them. "Why?" she whispered. This time he did not answer. But when he finally turned to her, his eyes were heavy with something she recognized all too well. Loss. Morning came too soon. Sarah awoke to find Taza already awake, crouched by the river, hands working quickly over a small fish he had caught. Margaret stirred beside her. "Mama." Sarah stroked her hair. "We're safe." Lillian sat up, rubbing her eyes. She glanced at Taza, then back at her mother. "Are we going to stay with him?" Sarah hesitated. The truth was they had no other choice. Taza handed her a piece of roasted fish. "Eat." She took it warily, offering the first bite to Margaret. The child hesitated, then took a small nibble. Her face scrunched, but she swallowed. Sarah took a breath and followed. It was not much, but it was food. Lillian edged closer to him. "You fight good." Taza glanced at her. "So do you." She flushed, then squared her shoulders. "I don't know how to fight." He studied her for a moment. "Not yet." Sarah watched as Lillian's expression shifted, something between curiosity and challenge. It was the first time she had seen her daughter look at someone without fear in a long time. Taza stood. "We move." Sarah rose, gathering what little they had. "Where?" "The mountains." He looked at her. "If we are lucky, they will not find us there." Her throat tightened. "And if they do?" His voice was steady. "Then we fight." By midday, the heat bore down on them. Sarah's dress stuck to her skin, sweat trickling down her spine. Margaret whimpered in discomfort, and Sarah lifted her, ignoring the ache in her arms. Taza walked ahead, his pace steady but never rushed. Lillian followed close behind. Sarah noticed how closely her daughter watched him, his stance, the way he scanned the terrain, how he moved through the land like it was an extension of himself. When he crouched suddenly, raising a hand for them to stop, Lillian froze immediately. Sarah's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Taza didn't answer. He moved slowly, his body low to the ground, eyes locked on something in the brush. Then, asterisk, asterisk, a rattle, asterisk, asterisk. Sarah's breath caught. "Snake." Taza moved fast. With a single fluid motion, he drew his knife and struck. The rattlesnake's body jerked before going limp. Lillian exhaled loudly. That was close. Taza picked up the snake, inspecting it. "It will feed us tonight." Margaret made a face. "We have to eat that." Taza gave a rare, slight smile. "Better than starving." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and something settled in her chest. He was no longer just a warrior. He was their only chance. And whether she liked it or not, she was beginning to trust him. The fire crackled softly, sending thin tendrils of smoke into the cool mountain air. Sarah sat near its edge, running a hand along Margaret's back as the child curled into her lap, her small body rising and falling with each deep breath. Lillian sat nearby, sharpening a stick with a stone, mimicking what she had seen Taza do earlier. The warrior sat across from them, silent as always, his gaze fixed on the surrounding darkness. He was always watching, listening, moving as though the land itself spoke to him. Sarah had spent years in the wilderness, had learned the unforgiving nature of it, but she had never seen anyone move through it as he did. He knew it in ways she never could. Lillian finally broke the silence. "You knew they were coming, didn't you?" Taza's gaze flicked to her. The firelight reflected in his dark eyes. "Yes." Sarah shifted, watching him closely. "Ow!" He didn't answer right away. He reached for his knife, running his thumb along its worn handle, considering. "I was meant to kill you." The words landed like a stone in Sarah's chest, heavy but not entirely unexpected. Lillian's hand tightened around the stick she had been carving. Margaret stirred slightly in her sleep, but Sarah kept her voice even. "And why didn't you?" Taza looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because I remembered." Sarah frowned. "Remembered what?" His gaze dropped to the blade in his hands. "What is to lose everything?" The fire popped, sending a brief shower of embers into the night air. Lillian swallowed. "Did you lose your family?" A long silence stretched between them. Then, finally, he nodded. Sarah wasn't sure why, but something inside her softened. She had lost two. Lillian glanced at her mother, then back at Taza. "Did you ever have kids?" Taza didn't move for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "A son." The flames crackled between them, but no one spoke. Margaret murmured in her sleep, pressing closer against Sarah's chest. Lillian's voice was softer this time. "What happened to him?" Taza looked past them, into the trees, as if seeing something long gone. "Soldiers." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold night air. She exhaled, long and slow. "You lost a child." Taza nodded once. Lillian hesitated, then reached for something in her pocket. She pulled out a small bundle of string and beads, something her father had made for her before he died. She studied it for a moment, then, with a quiet determination, extended it toward Taza. He looked at it, but did not take it. "It's for protection," Lillian said. "My father said it would keep me safe." Taza's fingers hovered over the simple trinket. Then, slowly he took it. Sarah watched the exchange, something tightening in her throat. Lillian had lost her father, and somehow, in this wild and broken place, she was reaching for something new, something unexpected. Taza held the small object in his hand for a long moment before tucking it carefully into the folds of his belt. "Thank you." Lillian smiled slightly before returning to her carving. Sarah watched her daughter, then looked back at the warrior across from her. Perhaps trust was not something that was given all at once. Perhaps it was built in moments like these. The next morning, they moved again. Taza led the way, silent as always, his body moving with practiced ease through the dense forest. Sarah followed, keeping Margaret close. Lillian walked beside her, glancing now and then at their unlikely guide. The journey was relentless. The terrain grew steeper, the wind sharper. Sarah's feet ached, but she didn't complain. She had learned long ago that survival was not about comfort. They stopped at a small stream to rest. Taza crouched near the water, cupping a handful to his lips before motioning for them to drink. Sarah knelt beside Margaret, dipping a cloth into the cool water before pressing it against the child's flushed cheeks. Margaret mumbled sleepily. "Tired." Sarah smoothed back her daughter's damp hair. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little farther." Lillian sat beside her mother, watching as Taza pulled something from his belt. It was a small pouch filled with dried herbs and crushed bark. He handed it to Sarah. "Chew this. It will help with the pain in your legs." She hesitated before taking it, placing a small piece between her teeth. A bitter, earthy taste spread across her tongue, but almost instantly, the tension in her muscles began to ease. She looked at him. "What is it?" "Willow bark." He tore a piece for himself and chewed. Sarah studied him. This man, this warrior, had been their enemy. And yet, here he was keeping them alive. She exhaled and looked away. Margaret, still sleepy, turned toward Taza, her small hands clutching the edge of his shirt. For the first time, he did not pull away. Days passed in a strange rhythm. The mountains provided shelter, but the threat remained. Every night, Taza scouted ahead, making sure they were not being followed. Sarah watched him, noting how he always placed himself between them and the open trails, how he kept an ear to the wind. Lillian watched him too. She mimicked his movements, tried to walk as he did, studied how he listened to the forest. One afternoon, while Sarah prepared what little food they had, she looked up to find Taza handing Lillian a bow. Sarah froze, but she did not speak. Lillian's eyes widened as she took the weapon, fingers wrapping clumsily around the wood. Taza knelt beside her, adjusting her grip. "Hold here." Lillian bit her lip, concentrating. Taza stepped back. "Now pull." She struggled at first, the tension in the string almost too much for her. But she did not give up. Sarah watched as her daughter, so determined, so stubborn, learned. The first arrow barely moved. The second went a little farther. By the fifth, it landed against a fallen log. Lillian grinned. Taza nodded. "Better." Sarah swallowed against the unexpected warmth in her chest. Margaret clapped. "Lily's a warrior." Lillian beamed. Sarah met Taza's gaze. "You didn't have to do that." His expression was unreadable. "She will need to know." Sarah exhaled, looking at her daughter, at the way she stood a little taller now. Perhaps he was right. That night, as the fire burned low, Sarah sat beside Taza. The girls were already asleep, curled together beneath a blanket. She watched them for a moment, then turned to him. "You could leave," she said quietly. Taza didn't respond. "You don't owe us anything," she continued. "Yet you stayed." He finally looked at her. "You were given to me." Sarah frowned. "What? In my people's ways," he said. "When a man saves a life, he is responsible for it." She swallowed. "So we are your burden?" Taza shook his head. "No, you are my choice." Sarah's chest tightened. She looked at the man beside her, at the warrior who had once been sent to kill her and her children. Now, he was their protector, their teacher, their family. She exhaled softly. "Then we will fight together." Taza nodded once. Together, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah did not feel alone. The wind carried the scent of rain and blood. The sky, bruised with storm clouds, rumbled in the distance, a warning from the heavens themselves. Taza stood at the edge of the ravine, his gaze fixed on the trail below, where the dust had only just begun to settle. The Apache war party was coming. He had known this moment would arrive. The only question was whether they would survive it. Sarah crouched beside him, rifle in hand, her grip tight but steady. Lillian stood just behind her, an arrow notched in the small bow Taza had taught her to use. Margaret huddled in the small crevice between two boulders, her wide eyes reflecting the firelight. Taza scanned the trees. They moved in shadows, creeping, waiting, preparing to strike. His people, his brothers. And yet, tonight, they were his enemy. He turned to Sarah. No hesitation. She nodded, her face pale but resolved. "I won't let them take my daughters." Lillian swallowed hard but didn't look away. "I can fight." Taza looked at the girl, so young, yet with a fire in her that had not been there before. He nodded once. "Stay close." The first arrow sliced through the air, embedding itself into the dirt just inches from Sarah's boot. She flinched but didn't break. The second arrow never landed. Taza had already fired back, his shot striking true. A cry of pain echoed through the trees. The war had begun. The attack came fast, brutal. Figures emerged from the darkness, their war cries rising above the wind. Sarah fired, her first shot dropping the nearest warrior. Taza moved swiftly, knife in one hand, tomahawk in the other, cutting down the first man who dared get close. Lillian let her arrow fly. It missed, but it sent another warrior ducking for cover. They were outnumbered. Sarah knew it. Taza knew it, but they would not surrender. A warrior lunged for Sarah. She spun, the rifle swinging like a club, catching him across the jaw. He staggered, and she fired again, the shot tearing through his chest. Another came for Lillian. The girl's hands trembled as she tried to reload, but she wasn't fast enough. He grabbed her by the arm, yanking her back. Taza was there before she could scream. His knife found the warrior's throat, his tomahawk splitting through bone. Lillian stumbled backward, breathless. She stared at Taza with wide eyes. He wiped the blood from his blade. "You are not ready to die yet." The words sent a chill down her spine, but she nodded. "Neither are you." Margaret whimpered from her hiding place, her tiny fingers digging into the earth. Sarah risked a glance toward her youngest, and in that moment, she saw him. Chato. He stood atop the ridge, watching. He was larger than the others, broader, his face lined with years of battle. A leader among their people, a friend from Taza's past. Now, his executioner. The moment stretched, heavy with meaning. Then Chato raised his war club. Taza understood the challenge. Without a word, he stepped forward. Sarah's breath caught. "No." Taza glanced back. "Keep them safe." Then he was gone. The others stopped fighting. The battle was no longer theirs. This was between warriors. Taza and Chato circled each other. The past lingered between them. Memories of hunts, of laughter, of battles fought side by side. That bond was gone. Chato struck first, swinging the club in a vicious arc. Taza ducked, rolling away, his tomahawk slicing through the air. Chato blocked it, their weapons locking. "You were one of us," Chato spat. Taza pushed back, his breath steady. "I was." Chato swung again, and this time the blow connected. Taza staggered as pain exploded through his ribs. He tasted blood. He did not fall. Sarah gripped her rifle, watching with wide, frantic eyes. Lillian clenched her fists. Margaret cried out, "No." Taza moved, faster than Chato expected, faster than the others could track. His tomahawk met flesh, tearing across Chato's side. The warrior growled, more anger than pain, and drove his knee into Taza's stomach. Taza dropped to a knee. Chato loomed over him, raising the war club for the final blow. A gunshot shattered the night. Chato stumbled. Blood bloomed across his shoulder. Sarah stood behind them, rifle still raised, the smoke curling from its barrel. Chato turned to her, fury in his eyes. He stepped forward. Taza lunged, knife flashing. It was over in a single strike. Chato's body jerked. His mouth opened, but no words came. He slumped forward, blood pooling beneath him. Silence. The remaining warriors hesitated. Their leader was dead. Taza rose, covered in sweat and blood. He stared them down. One by one, they stepped back. Then, as silently as they had come, they vanished into the trees. The war was over. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Lillian dropped to her knees, exhausted, her hands shaking. Margaret ran to Taza, throwing her arms around his waist. He hesitated for only a moment before resting a blood-stained hand on her small back. Sarah met his gaze. "You saved us." Taza wiped his blade. "You saved yourselves." Lillian stood slowly, wiping dirt from her face. Are you going to leave now?" Taza did not answer immediately. He looked at Sarah, at Margaret, still clinging to him, at Lillian, who had grown in ways she did not yet understand. He exhaled. "No." Sarah's eyes softened. The wind had changed. The storm was passing. For the first time, they were not just survivors. They were family.